Well, welcome everybody to CloudSuite Administration 101. My name is Tom Severson. I am the manager of RPI's technology practice, and I've been in the Lawson Infor technology world for going on 25 years now. So with me is Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Brewer. I am a senior technical consultant. I've also been in the Lawson realm for 20 plus years. I like to say I started when I was 15. So anyway, we're about to talk about CloudSuite, so let's go.
Yeah, so the purpose of today's webinar with you is really to provide an overview of the essential administration tasks that you will have as a client in Infor's multi-tenant environments. We're really going to start off and kind of talk about the different roles and responsibilities between Infor and you as the client, and then we're going to get into the actual, what your administrators, the areas that they're going to be going into and what they need to do in those various areas. So one of the biggest myths out there that we hear a lot is, all right, we are moving to Infor Cloud. They're going to host us. It's multi-tenant. We don't have to do anything. While Infor does do a lot, there's still a lot of activity that your system administrators are going to have to do. So Infor has a Infor SaaS delivery document that you will receive and acknowledge during your implementation. And really that kind of outlines what the roles and responsibility delineation is between Infor and you as the client. So really, what is Infor responsible for? They're really responsible to make sure that the infrastructure is solid and in place. So they take care of all of the servers. They do things like intrusion detection against the server environments and whatnot. They ensure that it has high availability. They do all of the database updates. You don't have to worry about anymore is my Lawson version okay with my server version, or my Infor version is no longer in the compatibility matrix. It's not going to work on my server. They take care of all of the infrastructure for you. They also are responsible for their code base. So the code behind the applications that are running, the code behind the toolkits and whatnot. So if you, throughout your journey with Infor, if you do find a bug within the system, it's Infor's responsibility to repair that bug and put it out in the form of a patch to the environment for you. So you as a client, you can see the major areas that you're responsible for. Basically everything in and around your use of the application, in and around your data, that's your responsibility. Setting up your users for access, that's all your responsibility and not Infor's. So if we dive down a little bit deeper into the client roles and responsibilities, you can see the first is administration. It really is up to your team to go in and manage the data that's being loaded in, how your users are accessing the system, what security roles they have. So your day-to-day administration. Also the operation of those applications. So if there is an error when running an application, your administrators will be going in and troubleshooting that error at the first level before you approach Infor, just to make sure it's not something that you're doing incorrectly. That it is an actual bug when you report it to Infor. You're also, like I said, at the tier 1 level for support, you are kind of responsible for going in and doing some advanced troubleshooting too. So if a process flow isn't running, it's up to your team to jump in and really kind of take a look and see why it might be stalled or why it might be failing, and do that degree of troubleshooting before you approach Infor and open a ticket. Also in and around functional support, so how your users are accessing the system, how they're closing the books and whatnot, how they are writing the reports, that's all up to you. So how you're accessing the information, how you're displaying the information for a report. Security we talked about a little bit before too. So Infor will lock people out of server access in your multi-tenant environment, but it's up to you to set your users up and control access to your actual applications. So the user provisioning and whatnot. Exactly. And then, lastly, the big part that you're responsible for centers around workflows and integrations. So if you are doing some development and you're putting in some process automation, or you're doing an integration with, a bank file, all of that integration is on you as the client to support and maintain.
Yeah, so Async. Async's a big one. Async is where your processes related to your application execute. If you want to think about old school Lawson or S3, it's kind of job scheduler on steroids. All your jobs go through here, your job streams, user-generated documentation, emails, a whole bunch of things go through Async. And obviously, not one person's going to sit there and watch Async all day long. So we recommend obviously setting up a notification, configure your notification within the tenant. And that would allow a person or a group to be notified if there is a failure, so they can get in there and take a look and see what's going on. So that's the big first step, is error handling. So there's typically 3 types of errors you'll find in Async. There's application-related errors, there are security-related errors, and then there's also environment data-related errors. So determining that's the first step. 2 things to note right off the bat is never ever delete a checkpoint record without analysis, and never delete a failed trigger without analysis. It can corrupt your data, it can cause a lot of issues. It doesn't allow you to do it very easily, because when you go to delete it, it actually asks you, are you sure? Because this can cause issues, and it can. So making sure that you're analyzing everything and being aware of what you're doing before you do it is very important. Requeuing is another thing that is very easy to try. You can requeue a failed process and see if it finishes, because a lot of times parallel processing happens when you have maybe a user sets off a job twice, or different users are running the same thing and it bumps against each other. It'll cause a checkpoint error. You can typically requeue those and it will be fine. Everything will finish without issue. However, if they don't, then you're back to the error handling and checking out, analyzing, going into a deeper dive into the errors. So that's a pretty big part, but also the cleanup of those queues, because a lot of time, well, remember, there's multiple queues. There's a default queue, and then there's many other queues that run in Async. And a lot of times during implementation or troubleshooting, or even if you're forgetful and just leave save history on, a lot of times those database files that hold on to the information for the finished triggers and anything related to those finished jobs and processes, those database files can gather or grow very quickly, rapidly, and it's a good idea to get in there and clean those up. You can set a schedule to do that. You can also just manually go in and clean those up as well. So very, very important, and it's a big part of the job.
So the next area that your administrators will be going into quite frequently is the process server area. So the process server is the area that really controls all of the automations. So any of your process flows that are running, this is where you can get at all of the information in and around those flows. So the typical task that you're going to be doing is really kind of looking if you're encountering an error where a flow isn't finishing or it's not acting as expected. You can go in and view the work units associated with that flow. So the work units really kind of contain all of the information that was fed to the flow to start running. You can get into the logs and whatnot and find out exactly where the processes are. Any error messages will be there. It gives you the ability to really kind of debug why that flow is misbehaving if you've got an error. Even if there isn't an error though, all of the work units for the flows that are running are displayed here in the process server administrator. It's important, like Sherry was saying with the async queue, as things kind of build up, it's important to go in and clean up your work units as well. The most typical route that folks go in cleaning up the work units is to move it from the active queue for jobs that have finished successfully. They move it into the historical area, and then they set up some type of routine to periodically go in and purge out that historical. So retain those work units for a month or whatnot, so you can go back and look at those. One of the more popular areas with process flows is the channel administrator. So the channel administrator is really kind of what you go in and set up for the flows to be able to use to output files to, say, an FTP server, or input files, monitoring a directory or a channel. If that is misbehaving, your administrators will go into that channel administrator Really kind of check out the connection. Maybe you were monitoring an FTP site and the credentials have changed for that FTP site. This is where you would go in and verify that all of your connections are active and healthy. Another thing that you can do is if a flow kicks off prior to, say, a file that it was expecting, instead of waiting for the next run of that, your administrators can go in and actually force a scan of that directory to relook for the file once it's there and process normally. Process server is also where you go in to schedule these flows. So maintaining the schedule so you can run flows nightly or whatnot. One of my favorite areas is in the configuration set. So flows really look at these configuration sets that you define for all of their parameters, basically. So where am I looking? What are the credentials for that FTP server? One of my favorite areas, though, is your developers that are going in and doing these process automations. They can set up variables in that configuration set that can be used. One of the typical ones that I do is on my non-production environments, I have a variable in there that says test. So any emails that are generated from this IPA, in the subject it says test, so everybody knows that it's coming from the test system. The variable is also in prod, but it's just empty, so then it's not test, it's in your production environment. And then kind of the last area, again, process server controls all of your process automations. So you have a list of all of the process automations that are delivered by Infor, that your developers have created. This is where all of those live as well, and you can look at those. Probably one of the more important areas is if you publish a flow and it breaks something, your administrators will be able to go in, pull up that flow, and actually roll back. It maintains all of the versioning, so they can revert back to that previous version that was working, and they can try to get that flow in corrected. This is also where you can go if you are finished with a flow, you would be able to go in and enable or disable the flow. Another area that your folks are going to really be going in is the user management area. So this really controls who has access to your Infor environments, who can log in and start doing things. So all of your users will be listed there, information about the users, their landmark IDs, so they can do some troubleshooting. It's also where you would go and modify the user security. So if Sherry needed an additional role to be able to access an area of HR, I would go into the user management section and assign that role to her. And then the next time she logs in, she would have access to that. This is also where you can go in and disable or delete users. It's really kind of important to know when you are removing users. The disable function is popular if you think that they're going to be coming back. So you're disabling them for a brief period of time. The delete, it's important to know, it goes into a soft delete. So there is another section in the user management area for your soft deleted users. The reason that it goes into soft delete instead of completely just removed from the system is for historical tracking. You can see what activity that user had done before they were soft deleted. Of course, if they're truly gone and you want to purge them out of the system, you would delete them from the soft deleted area.
Yeah. Also, remember that the user management is per tenant. So
correct.
Yeah, it's not just one place. In every tenant, if you want those users to have access, you have to get in there and do the exact same thing for every tenant.
Yeah.
So it can be time consuming.
Yep. There are a lot of processes that will be running that are not user initiated as well. Right. For those, most commonly, you are setting up some service accounts. So this is an account that the server recognizes and it's authorized, security in and around that, to be able to do functions that don't require any user interaction. So the service accounts are listed there as well. Mm-hmm. And then for your security team, you have access and monitoring and access logs. Yeah. So you can really kind of see who's accessing the system, when they're accessing it. You can see failed login attempts, so you can see if maybe somebody's trying to hack in. So your security team will be hitting that. Another area is the ION desk that your administrators will be going. So ION really is the service bus that moves data through and in and out of Infor. So ION desk is where your administrators will go and really kind of troubleshoot some tasks centered in and around that. One of the first areas that they'll be going to, they'll notice that, hey, you know, my users aren't syncing between Mingle and Landmark. So I made a security change in Mingle, but now Sherry goes in to access the system and she still can't get to the functional areas in Landmark. What the administrators typically will do is go into Ion Desk and they'll take a look at the data flows and the connection point status. 9 times out of 10, one of those is going to be down, so you have the ability to go in and restart it. You can stop it, you can pause it. So this is where you can really kind of take a look at the health of your connection points. Right now in the Ion Desk as well is where you would go to access the data lake functions. So if you're using the data lake to store, you know, ancillary data from, you know, disparate sources and whatnot, this is where you can go in and view the objects that are in your data lake. You can query against those objects, and then you can also purge the data out if you're no longer, you know, using that data. You can also see kind of historical events on those data loads as well. So you can take a look at the criteria that was used to populate those. Now, key thing to remember here is come April, these data lake functions move to their own module, and it's called the Infor Data Fiber. It's on the multi-tenant right now, so you can get in there and view. There's some enhanced capabilities in and around data lake functions in that new module. Come April, though, it will no longer be available in Ion Desk, so you'll only be able to do it with the new module. Ion Desk, you know, like Sherry was saying too, on the async queues, you know, nobody wants to really sit there and monitor it the entire time. So it's important to set up some notifications. So if there's a failure, who do I notify? You know, what do I do in those cases? The same thing occurs on the Ion Desk as well. So this is where you would go in and set up the recipients of any, you know, notifications that you want to send and define what those notifications are.
Okay, what day is it? If it's the third Saturday of every month, it's CU Patching Day. So Infor releases patches monthly. And actually, if you have a pre-prod, it will be released about 5 weeks prior to prod and your other non-prod tenants. However, the patching is released whether you like it or not. So be aware, it usually starts around midnight that Saturday morning of the third Saturday of the month, and it's completed by morning. However, there's a lot of information Infor provides. Here are some of the KB articles that they give you to prepare if you don't have a pre-prod, so you can actually get in there and look and see what's going to change. You can look obviously at the dates for the whole deployment calendars. You can look at the trainings out there. They really do have a lot of information that they provide you with. There's a ton of KB articles and documents to download. But on the next slide, the master KB, this 1935818, is really pretty much the master KB for all the CU releases. It's a great article if you only sign up for one. This is the one to sign up for, because everything here you can link to from what was in the previous slide. They have, again, the trainings, the highlight release notes, the supplementary updates, you name it, everything is linked off of here. So you don't really have to know many KB articles if you don't want to. You come here, you can link out to wherever you want to go. And again, it does provide you with the information so that if you don't have a pre-prod environment to go to and test, you can at least be aware of what's going to change, so that once the patch is released, you can get in there and start looking at the changes that you know are coming.
Yeah, this is the one that I bookmark.
Yeah,
it's
this
the only
is
one
definitely the best one for sure. And they really did consolidate it, because I think there were so many, it became, you know, hard to keep track. So this is really great. And it really does, you can go back to other previous releases, and then, like I said, the documentation is out there quite early, about probably 6 weeks early, and then for pre-prod you have that to go in and test. Otherwise you can obviously go out and look at the documentation to know what's coming up. But once the patch is in, there are a lot of post-CU patching tasks for the administrators, and there's quite a few here. Some don't apply to everyone, and some don't apply every month. Like MSCM, you might not have MSCM to worry about, or printer agents, there might not be anything to do for that. However, you always want to verify your configurations. You always want to get in and look at your async and make sure that everything's clean, everything's been requeued or dealt with. And there's also a good time. The DEPM is not updated automatically through the CU update. However, there typically are updates monthly or every few months. So it's a good time to update that, because you also have to update your desktop versions of Process Designer, Spreadsheet Designer, and then of course if you're updating DEPM, you'd have to update Application Studio. So since you're doing all that, it's kind of a good idea to get it all done in one fell swoop. And then there's also a lot of race testing. If you don't have pre-prod, it's a good idea to get in after the patch is applied and make sure that your smoke tests for all your race items are working as you would like, and not having any issues, because come Monday when all the people get in and start testing, it could be a little overwhelming. So that's kind of more of a functional support, but also something that's pretty important to note and make sure that you get in there, and especially on CU weekend, to make sure everything's processing like it should. The cross-tenant data refresh, I always do that, is not something that happens all the time, obviously, but it happens a lot. And it's really copying data from one tenant to another, typically from your prod to your non-prod tenant. It is done by Infor. They actually do the data copy. So you have to enter a ticket to get that done. Once that's scheduled, there are some pre-tests you want to make sure that you take care of before they do the data refresh. Because if you have any in-development work, that's going to be overwritten. So any IPA flows, any configurations, personalizations, all that's going to be overwritten.
Security changes.
Yes, exactly. So if you back those up ahead of time, then once the refresh happens, you can put those back into place. So that's a big one, because you don't want to lose that, especially if you have developers in there working. There's also a lot of burst. If you use burst, there's a lot of burst actions to take after the refresh, because you not only have to delete the burst data, you have to purge data lake, you have to replicate it again, run some workflows. It's quite a process. It's pretty big. So that's another one that's big. Also remember that the job schedule comes over whenever you are refreshing a tenant. So if you're coming from prod to a non-prod, typically you don't want all those jobs running that you have in prod, and that could cause issues. So you need to get in there and stop those jobs from running as well. And also, of course, as always, cleaning up your async, making sure you don't have any errors, ion, everything like that. So just making sure things are running smooth. But again, it's not a daily task, but it's something that when it does happen, an administrator needs to get in there and take care of that.
Absolutely.
This is also a really good point here for the admins. Infor used to send out emails regarding notifications for any outages, any maintenance windows, but they don't do that anymore. So the workaround for that is to go to the status.infor.com is an easy way to get there. You can go through Concierge. You log in, it will show you your tenants, it will show you all your products. It has the status to see if it's operational. If there's an asterisk by that, typically that means there was an issue, so you can actually click on that and see what the issue was, how long the outage was. It's a good first step that, if people are complaining, say I can't get to burst, my system's slow, just to come in here and take a look, just to see if things are really running as they should before you open a case with Infor. Yeah,
checking here will save a lot of troubleshooting time. Instead of diving down into the weeds, you can just go up to this site and say, oh yeah, we had an outage 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. So that's really important with Concierge. And then also on the next slide, the entering tickets. Again, you're always going to be communicating with Infor, whether it be for a data refresh, whether it be for an issue, enhancement request. Everything has always gone through Concierge, and it still does. You add your incidents. It's also a great tool to use to, like I said, you can find all the KB articles, you can look at the status. It really does provide you with a lot of information.
Yeah, so basically, we've kind of shown you what Infor is responsible for, and you see now how much you are responsible for as well. Fortunately, Infor is there absolutely to support you. So when you open tickets, they will help troubleshoot you. Of course, we here at RPI, we have a managed services offering too, where we're doing a lot of these steps for you, if you choose, training your team on how to do the steps. So that's available from RPI as well.
Right.
Well, coming up, we do have a couple of Events, the first one is Infor's HCM Road Mapping Festival. That's here in Baltimore. The date's in end of January. Great time to come and get some hands-on experience with the HCM, do the road mapping for your organization. And then for those of you like me who live in the cold north, taking a trip to Florida in January is a perfect excuse. So we have a CloudSuite boot camp. So this is a highly intensive hands-on session, really going into everything technical within your CloudSuite organization.